Hello everyone, I'm CoolGuy, welcome back. Trials of Osiris has returned, and the thing about these Trials weapons is that they're designed to duel. The perk pools are designed to do well in gunfights. Very little damage dealing perks, some only have one, and this can take away from PvE usage. There are some standouts, but otherwise, they're designed quite well for PvP. Today, I want to talk about the Solar Trials of Osiris 600 RPM Auto Rifle, the Summoner, and this weapon's taken me a little bit to review because the more I messed with it, the more I found out, the more I compared it to other 600 legendaries, and that's what I want to showcase today. As you know, my reviews usually come out a little bit later than most. That isn't by design, I promise. I wish they could get out a little bit quicker. And with that said, I want to stop for a moment and say thank you to each and every one of you. I was recently chosen to be on the Bungie Community Focus. That isn't possible without you. That means a lot to me. So thank you for your support. There's a link down below if you'd like to read it. Back to Summoner, there's a lot to learn about it, and I think after the review section and everything is talked about, it's going to be very black and white, no gray area, because there's some things that make it feel really good, and there are some things that you would think are working well, but aren't really. This review is a tad longer, though the video is focused on the Summoner. It's going to break into direct comparisons to a couple other popular legendaries, Gnawing, Galliard, and a couple more. That way you can see the bigger picture as to what these legendary 600s are bringing to the table, what's going on with them, what you should be looking at. First things first, this is a good weapon. Let's get that right. It duels very well in the current sandbox, and in the background gameplay, there's various footage. There's a Wii ran on PC using controller. There's a Wii ran on Xbox in here somewhere. There's a Wii ran with Galliard at one point. I have some mouse and keyboard footage, and I'm still trying to get better with my tracking with M and K, so it's baseline footage. And I do talk about it a little bit. Summoner is 600 RPM, one of the strongest archetypes in the game right now. There's a lot to like, but I do want to get to the bottom if it's good enough. That's the goal. As the weeks go on, these are going to drop from time to time with token turn-ins, and some of you might get your very first one when it comes back in rotation. As always, let's start with the scope, the recoil direction, and the feel. Here's the deal. This thing doesn't act right, and I say that in a good way. It feels like something's on it, either persistence, rodeo, a version of dynamic sway reduction. I don't say that lightly, that something like this is on here, because at first I thought maybe it's the frame, because no one really talks about the adaptive frame on an auto rifle. It states it's a well-rounded grip, more reliable and sturdy. There might be some truth into what we're seeing with that, but with Summoner, no matter what barrel you are using, what mod you are using, after about 5 or 10 quick rounds, it starts to level off and become a laser. Similar to Outbreak Perfected, it's very controllable, and if you have Summoner, I bet you feel it and I bet you see it because I can't be the only one. I did all my direction tests with arrowhead chambered, adding counterbalance mods, base recoil, all of it ends up the same in the end. Fairly straight. Gnawing doesn't do this. Galliard doesn't do this. Other 600s that I tested that I have, they don't do this. Some of them get a tad bit more stable as you fire, but none of them do it like Summoner. So out of the gate, right here at the start, this is one of the main reasons to use it. It feels very good in a gunfight. There's a game on Retribution in the background. It's going to go in and out during various portions of the review. This is with controller on console. I'm using full bore, high cal, stability masterwork, and a targeting adjuster. As much range as I could possibly get with 0 perks helping recoil direction. I ended up getting a Wii ran with it. It felt fine. Usually, with pulses, ARs, you have to do something, a counterbalance mod, arrowhead break, but for whatever reason, Summoner doesn't rely on any of that, and that's a good thing. However, I'm not saying that adding a counterbalance mod, arrowhead break, chambered compensator, or any other barrel won't help it, because they do. You're going to be clearing up the first couple shots, get them in line before it starts jumping into that autopilot straight line that it does. There are perks that can roll on the weapon as well that's going to help this out too. With the barrels, I wouldn't stress about it. On PC, you can use full bore and be okay. On controller, I would go on feel. Add a counterbalance mod if you don't like the first couple shots, add a recoil direction perk like arrowhead break if you have it. The end result is pretty much the same. I wouldn't call a particular barrel the best. Controller players generally want stability, M and K goes for range. That still holds true with Summoner. But when your choices come up, pick the very best one for you. Don't get stressed out. Don't be discouraged if you get small bore or something like that when you wanted arrowhead break. You're going to be fine. And if it's feeling this good and stable and controllable with the controller on console, what about mouse and keyboard? It acts the exact same and even better. The same things apply that we were seeing on console. It has some rounds that jump at the very start, and you can clean that up if you feel you need to, but at base, if you get small bore, extended barrel, full bore, it's going to be fairly stable. For the time I used it, it was competing and it felt good with mouse and keyboard. The next thing, that brings us to the actual scope, and that's why I test, because everything about the looks of this thing screams that it has a mid-zoom scope. It's boxy, it does appear to have zoom, and that's what I initially thought, because a little bit of zoom is a very good thing. We're going to explore that right now, the importance of a zoom factor. The Summoner doesn't have a zoom factor. This is a short zoom scope. When talking about zoom magnification, that isn't the be-all end-all, but here's how important it is and why I wish it did have a better zoom factor. And this is also going to talk about effective range a little bit. I have 4 weapons here, 3 of them have a 60 range stat, and the 4th is a combination of what I want to show. The first one is a summoner with a 60 range stat. These 600s do 26 to the head, 8.7 TTK, so the more you can push that out a little bit to get that 0.7 or make it a little bit more relaxed at a distance, the better. This base summoner with 60 range starts seeing fall off at 26 meters. On meter 27, it starts doing 25 to the head. The next summoner has a 60 range stat, but it has rangefinder. Rangefinder increases effective range and zoom magnification. So this one hits max range up to right at about 29 meters. You take a small step back, the 26 crit falls to 25. So when adding rangefinder, you're adding the zoom magnification and you're adding on 3 meters of fall off. The third weapon is Galliard. It rolls with scopes, not barrels. That's important. We've seen what a base 60 stat does, up to 26 meters. We've seen a 60 stat with rangefinder up to 29 meters, but this Galliard has rampage and a medium zoom scope. This is the Black Armory version. It's very similar to the Year 1 version Galliard that you can pull from your collections right now. It has the same scope, same perk. Only with this one, I can place on a mod and have, well, in my case, auto-loading holster. 60 range stat, medium zoom hits up to 32 meters, whereas the summoner with its sight, with its scope, its 60 range stat hits at 26 meters. Both don't have rangefinder, but the Galliard hits 6 meters further because of that medium zoom scope, and it isn't that bad to duel with at all. This means when it starts seeing fall off, stepping back 33, 35 meters away, it dips from 26 to 25 to 24 and holds that distance that you're able to duel with at a longer range. This is up into that hard light range. Whereas the summoner with 60 range and no rangefinder, or even with rangefinder, starts doing 20 or 21 to the head at this distance. A lot of people are talking about Galliard right now. It's very hard to get, it has very good perks. Importantly, it rolls with scopes, and you can get Outlaw, Kill Clip, with a medium zoom. It's pound for pound one of the best weapons of the game currently. What I'm going for is just Kill Clip Outlaw, or actually just a Kill Clip version of Galliard with a medium zoom scope. Because that medium zoom scope makes it easily compete with almost any weapon in the game. It really does. So the last weapon is pulled from collections. It's the Solemn Hymn. It's got a 76 range stat, so adding a lot more range, and it has a medium scope. So it's the best of everything, really. It hits max damage up to 36 meters. This is what a high range stat and a medium zoom scope working together looks like. And it even feels good up to 40 meters. It's insane for an auto rifle. That's just a small picture into what it can mean and why people are going for Galliard. Gnawing Hunger is really good too. It doesn't get out as far as these do, as these ones with medium zoom scopes, but it does have a really good perk pool. Zoom magnification is a big thing, and it's a real shame that Summoner doesn't have any. It doesn't make it bad though, it's just something to notice. When looking at the magazine, there's some really good options. A pure mag option like appended actually works because of how Summoner shoots, getting the magazine longer up to that hard light type starting mag number. But the top options go to ricochet rounds, +5 to range, and +10 to stability. That goes for both M&K and controller, but a low-key good one's actually going to be high caliber rounds. The 600s haven't really had them. High cals are on Monte Carlo, and for randomly rolled legendaries, it's Ether Doctor, Galliard, and Summoner. There were some early weapons in early Destiny that have them locked in that you can pull from collections, but you have a steady weapon here with Summoner applying flinch. It also gives +5 to range. It's a solid pick. Moving on to the perk pool, it's designed well. First we have Overflow. Picking up special or heavy ammo reloads the magazine to beyond normal capacity. It's usually just going to double your base magazine, whatever you have. It can pretty much go as high as you can make it go. If you have extended mag and add on backup mag, it can get to well over 100 rounds, and this is definitely what you want for PvE. You're seeing Arc Logic with Overflow Rampage in the background. I'm getting the mag to over 80, and again, I can go above that if I put on a backup mag, but I can shoot at my target, get a kill, have Rampage just mow through enemies, not have to worry about a reload. I can find another special brick on the ground, bypass the reload again to get it right back up to 80 or 100. And on Dire Promise, on Arc Logic, on the Summoner, there are really bad perks that can roll in a perk node, so don't get mad if this drops for you. I personally like it a lot, and I believe it's criminally underrated, especially for the Crucible. I would much rather have this than, let's say, Underdog. If you want Summoner with Overflow, remember you need to be able to accept a special brick, so you can't run double primary. You need to pair it with a shotgun, sniper, bastion. Overflow is very good. Moving target, increased movement speed and target acquisition when aiming down sights. When aiming down sights, you're granted a passive +5 aim assist to the weapon and around a +2 to the mobility stat when moving. The mobility stat is tied to your walk speed, strafe speed, and jump height. The stat does max out at 10 mobility. But with moving target, when you're aiming down sights, you can go beyond 10 mobility to around what would be 12 in game when strafing and aiming down sights. So a faster strafe even if you have max mobility on. It's a good perk, it just makes any weapon better. We have Zen Moment, top tier for it. Zen Moment states causing damage with this weapon increases its stability. What Zen Moment does is the stability increased after each hit is capping out at 66% after 5 hits. And when it caps at 66%, it's going off of your base stability bar with no perks added. Zen Moment is one of the best perks for Summoner. I don't have it personally, but when you look at how it functions, we know that it has some stray shots in the beginning when you start shooting that first 6 to 10 rounds. If you have Zen Moment, start getting the perk going, it's going to level it out faster and clear up those early shots because it's getting more stable as you're landing shots on your target. Very good for it. Underdog, when you're in red health, you get a boost to your reload speed. Here's the deal. This season, there's literally a mod that grants enhanced auto rifle reloading, and after this season, you can just add on an auto rifle reloader on your gauntlets. The perk pool still has Zen Moment, moving target, overflow, and this next perk that we're getting ready to talk about, dynamic sway reduction. This is at the bottom of the barrel for me personally, because other perks are going to help you out way more. I wouldn't settle for this. Next, let's talk about dynamic sway reduction. When holding down the trigger, this weapon's sway reduction system boosts accuracy over time. I've talked about this in many videos before. Talked about it in the DCP firing range podcast. Any perk that specifically states the word accuracy or the term target acquisition, you need to pay attention to. At base, on this crosshair, that circle gets wide. That's your accuracy. Your bloom blooming out as you're holding down the trigger. And when you're aiming down sights, this is compacted. But with dynamic sway, the accuracy cone goes in the opposite direction. It sucks in. Accuracy and stability kind of play off of each other. Where Zen Moment has stability at the forefront, the more stable you get, the more accurate you are. With dynamic sway, it's the opposite direction. You're getting very high, good accuracy quicker, and in turn, it's making it more stable. With how the frame works, it's top tier. Of this column, I would rank the top 2 perks as Zen Moment and dynamic sway reduction, followed by overflow and moving target, then underdog. Perk column 2, elemental capacitor. On a void subclass, you get better stability. On arc, better handling, and on solar, better reload. I don't have one, but I do know the value of elemental capacitor. It's rumored to give around plus 20, plus 25 to the stability stat where you're on a void subclass. That's enough to even feel it on mouse and keyboard. So you would be using it specifically on a void subclass. The others can be simulated. Enhanced auto reloader takes place of what solar would give you. You can go dexterity and targeting for what arc gives you. Void is the real winner here, so if you plan to run void, it's a top tier perk for you. Rampage, one of the very few times we see a damage dealing perk on these new weapons. A ×1 stack is 10%, ×2 is 21, and ×3 is 33% more damage, and you can keep chaining it. You can keep that 3 stack and keep going. More damage is never a bad thing, and with Summoner's Magazine, you can easily down one target, have enough in the magazine for the next target. It's a top option to think about. Dragonfly, get a precision final blow, you get an area of effect explosion, and just like Rampage, you can have the Rampage spec for more added time. Dragonfly has a mod for increased radius and damage on explosion. I personally wouldn't put this as a must-have, however, it does have some use. In PvE definitely, and in the Crucible, you're going to be punishing players that are grouped up together, and if they get hit by a Dragonfly explosion, they're going to be an easy cleanup. It's going to be a perk that if you get one to drop, play a couple games, see how frequent you're getting Dragonfly explosion on other players, you're going to start seeing how much value you personally find in it. That's really the only way. Some players love it, some players stay away. Rangefinder, always a good perk, but I am hesitant with it. You could get your effective range out to about 31 meters on a max range roll, and you still have the frame getting stable as you shoot it. Now, once I saw that you're adding about 3 meters, the base zoom is low, it kind of lost some points for me. And I'm not saying rangefinder is bad at all. It does have a big boxy scope, and that zoom factor with rangefinder is going to bring that up a little bit, making closer fights seem like you're literally looking through a magnifying glass, so it can be tough. In the end though, it's going to help you more than it hurts you. Last perk, Celerity. Top tier perk, gain the following effects when you're the last living member of your fire team. Increased target acquisition, handling and reload speed, and reduced flinch from incoming fire. I made a video recently in depth on what this does. There's a link below and a card at the top of the screen if you would like to see it. Here are the quick notes. When you're the last living member, you get a massive boost to your target acquisition, and double targeting perks on your helmet stack on that, and a targeting adjuster stacks on that. The reload buff is the same as an enhanced reloader, and the handling boost is the same exact perks that quick draw would give. The unflinching perk that it gives stacks with enhanced unflinching. It makes you very strong in a 1v1. It's really one of the best perks in the game, but it's situational. With Celerity on this AR, you're going to be getting rolls, you're going to be getting drops. Bank a roll to try it at some point. It's going to be designed for 3v3 elimination. In this column, as far as ranking, Celerity is kind of off by itself because it's so niche. It has a purpose, and if you want it for that purpose, you want to get a roll with it. The other perks, it's going to be based on how you play. Elemental Capacitor is a top perk, but it's not going to be if you don't run a Void subclass. Rangefinder would be more beneficial in that scenario. I would say out of the 4 left, not counting Celerity, all of them are good, really. Rampage works, Rangefinder works, Elemental Capacitor works well with a Void subclass, Dragonfly for some of you that find benefit with it. For the perk combinations, and from what I've tested, for PvE and PvP, one option is going to be Overflow Rampage. It just works well. Overflow could also be paired with Dragonfly, or Elemental Capacitor, or Rangefinder. But the top rolls for PvP though, it's going to start with Zen Moment and Dynamic Sway Reduction. With how this weapon is shooting, you will see an impact in your gunplay with these perks on it. From there, you pair it with those things again, Elemental Capacitor for Void, Rampage, or Rangefinder. They're all going to be good options. It's going to depend on how you want to play. If you want something that's pure dueling, you would pair Rangefinder with it. If you main like Spectral Blades, it's going to be Elemental Capacitor. And Rampage simply is just going to be good. And that isn't to say that moving target paired with those perks in that second perk column wouldn't be good, because it is going to be good. All of it works well. It's designed to duel. It's going to really depend on what you find value in, what you and your personal playstyle gets the most out of. I do believe that Zen Moment and Dynamic Sway are at the forefront of this weapon that really help it out of the gate. For masterwork, range stability, and handling take the top spot. If you get, let's say, full bore and then ricochet rounds, if you get something like a stability masterwork, that's going to bring up the slack that full bore took away, and you're going to have a more complete weapon. If you get high caliber rounds and let's say polygonal for the barrel, a ranged masterwork will bring up the slack because you're getting more stability from polygonal. You're gonna end up getting a more complete weapon. And even if you go strong in one direction, that can work too. If you go all range or all stability, it's gonna be fine. It's for dueling, and all of these ways work. I think when it drops, stat it out the best that you can, it's going to perform well. It's the right archetype, it's got the right TTK, it's got the right everything. So let's get back to that question, is it good enough? I think yes. This is a very good weapon, even though it doesn't have the actual range to compete against Galliard or Hardlight past 30 meters. I believe that within range it does, and it does it well, because I've outdueled them. I've done well. I've had Wee Rans. I've outdueled Suros too. What you lose in the range department versus other popular 600s, you gain with how this frame shoots, with how this weapon is shooting. And when I say that, that's with player-controlled recoil. You control it, it gets stable, and once you hit that sweet spot, it becomes a laser, how it levels off and gets near perfectly straight. That's why you're using it. That's why it competes. That's why it's good, and it's good enough. All the perks, barrels, mods added enhance that. For the mod, I would go target adjuster for controller, possibly even PC with how Destiny 2 works with aim assist. If not, it's going to be a counterbalance mod that you're going to find some use out of. And depending on your role, even a backup mag. You can't look at range and fall off and say that's the only factor. There's a lot more to that. I personally do believe a fully kitted Galliard with damage dealing perks with the medium zoom scope is going to edge it out on a pure engagement to engagement basis, because you're going to have various engagement distances. But I do believe Summoner can be just as good. For it to do that, you need to make sure your gunfights are within 30 meters. Just like a Suros, and depending on your range stat, that 30 meters could actually be 26 or 27, and that distance is the same exact as your everyday hand cannon. Within that range, you're getting that 0.7 TTK. And one of the last big things on why it competes, why it's good enough, is the obvious one: your exotic is freed up. That's for Chaperone, Bastion, and for you maniacs, Cerberus, and Huckleberry. If those exotics are lethal in your hands, Summoner is pretty much a must-have at that point. I know this review is long, but I wanted to take a look at where Summoner fits in your loadout and where it compares to other popular 600 legendaries. I hope it helped. If you're new here, remember to hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to get videos right when they go live. If you are subbed, thank you for your support. And if you learned something, enjoyed it, or maybe not so much, remember to rate the video, it helps a ton. What do you think about Summoner? How's it working for you? And what roles are you liking? And what roles would you recommend to your fellow players? Thank you for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.